Thank you so much. My topic is renewable diesel from waste and residuals, and I think it's combining and connecting quite nicely with Nils Olof's earlier presentation, because the history between Helsinki traffic and VTT is coming decades since. But I mean, we had the first large-scale bus fleet test some 10 years ago with 350 normal buses in normal daily traffic here in Helsinki region with a completely new type of a fuel. Sorry, did I interrupt you? So, no. Okay. So it's very interesting because what I'm going to share with you is our view on renewable fuels and how we think about the decarbonization of the societies. Neste Oil is an oil company in Finland. We have some 5,000 people working here. We have a big oil refinery in Finland, actually two, and then renewable diesel units in Finland and Singapore and Rotterdam. So we have a global view on fuels market, different types of feedstocks, and also regulations and customers, meaning bus fleet operators, cities, and so on. And we think that it is very crucial that we have different types of solutions for decarbonizing the cities, and we understand that our part of this task is very much related to combustion in engines and very much to the topics which were presented by Nils Olof just in the previous presentation. In the modern cities, there are plenty of different type of technologies. There will be electrification, there will be different type of liquid energy forms. And as we can see, people are moving also by bikes and so on. We think that it's very good. And to make the change and decarbonizing happening quickly is important, but it's also a question of costs, like we discussed earlier. This is a Roland Berger study comparing different solutions from the cost perspective for the heavy-duty vehicles in blue piles and then passenger cars in the green piles. And as you can see, if you have an average cost to society in euros to reduce 1 ton of CO2, the best solution is waste and residue-based renewable diesel. And then if you combine a new type of diesel with new type of Euro 6 engine, you also get very, very low local emissions. So cost efficient, good solution in terms of CO2 reduction, and also very, very low local emissions, which are, of course, an important thing as well. But we understand that there will be a different parallel systems in the traffic systems in different applications. Neste MY renewable diesel is the highest diesel quality in the world, and we say this claim based on the testing both in Finland. Like I mentioned, the first test was roughly I think it was almost 10 years ago, when we had 350 buses in the normal traffic here, different types of engines, different type of driving patterns, and then also a significant test program outside Finland with engine manufacturers and also bus fleet operators, for instance, in Germany. We use proprietary technology. And we are using nowadays 80% waste and residue type of feedstocks. I will come back to the feedstock question later. Maybe the important thing for the user is that this type of a fuel can be used in any blending ratio, so between 0 to 100. It's basically, it has a hydrocarbon type of a chemical structure, which means that you can use existing storage systems and you can use existing logistical systems. And there are no needs to change basically the engines in the cars. So it's a drop in fuel, which you can put in use without any modifications there. It's a free in terms of free of aromatics and impurities, so you can see the difference in local emissions when it's burned. But it also gives you roughly 90% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions if you are using waste type of feedstocks. The greenhouse gas emissions are calculated over the whole value chain from the feedstock production. So it very much depends on what type of a feedstocks you have. And that determines basically how big the reduction in CO2 emissions you get. Here is a comparison of fossil diesel on the left-hand side, 83.8 grams per megajoule. And then we have renewable diesel produced from palm oil, which is a very debated feedstock, but it's a very good feedstock if it's produced in a good manner. You have roughly 50%, more than 50% reduction, but if you use waste, you get even more, so 30 grams per megajoule compared to 83.8 grams with fossil diesel. Last year we calculated that we have been able to replace roughly 6.7 million tons of CO2, which corresponds roughly 2.4 million passenger cars in the traffic in Finland. And we said just that our target for 2020 is 9 million tons of CO2 reduction in 3 years' time. So it's an industrial scale of product. It's available in commercial scale. We are selling in Europe, of course, and in Scandinavia, but a lot of to for instance, in California. This fuel is very flexible what comes to different types of feedstocks. So we have technically roughly 13 different types of feedstocks which we can use. We have been moving from vegetable oils to different types of industrial residuals, and the company's R&D activities almost completely focusing on finding new feedstock streams, and this is a global activity. So you can see here that 78%, actually I think it's a bit more than 80% at this stage. Waste and residues, it means different types of materials from food industry and chemical industry. We are using animal fats, so animal fat-based wastes. We are using technical corn oil, etc., etc. 19% in 2016 was palm oil, and we recognize the discussion around palm oil. We have been part of the discussion around palm oil, and we have been moving out from palm oil. But nevertheless, we still think that when palm oil is used and produced in a good manner, it's a good feedstock. But of course, not all people and not all companies are accepting palm oil, but nevertheless, we think it's a good. And if you have time, so if you go to a website which is nestepalmoildashboard.com, you can see our transparent palm oil supply chain. So you can see all our mills which were supplying us last year. You can find there a map, and if you press a dot on the map on mill meaning, you find the certification documents, you find coordinates, you find company names and background data on certification systems, and you also find a link to the satellite camera, so you can zoom in and see the building where the palm oil was crushed and separated from the fresh fruit bunches. So this is the level of transparency we try to come also with some other key feedstocks in as quickly as possible. Okay, I mentioned also already the R&D activity. We have roughly 15 to 20 agreements with different type of institutions, and both in academia and also private research institutions around the world on new types of feedstocks, because we think that the existing feedstocks are of course important, but in the longer run there will be different types of biological pathways. There will be different types of thermocatalytical pathways, which means gasification technologies, what you're using to make gas and then to transform the gas into the fuel. And there will be also probably different types of photosynthesis, meaning algae and this type of materials, which will come into use at some point. But when this is going to happen in industrial scale, it's very difficult to say. The best estimate is perhaps that maybe in between 5 and 10 years' time. This diesel fuel is available at pumps for consumers. So we launched Neste My Diesel for the consumer sales last year. And I think it's the only European offer of this type of a fuel. In California, we have a couple of customers who are selling this also directly to the customers. But here in Helsinki and in Finland, you can buy this at pumps. And we were surprised positively how big the demand was for this type of a fuel. So people are thinking about CO2 and local emissions more and more. And fuels are not similar anymore. Couple of examples. UPS has been using our fuel in their fleet since 2015. Google has been using and is using our fuel in their buses in Silicon Valley, and so on and so forth. And if you're interested, so please visit our website for details, both on the product and on the company. It's neste.com. Thank you.